Jake, you're really welcome, and thanks so much for joining us. It's hard to start any conversation at the moment, particularly one focused on young people and peace building, and not to acknowledge the crisis in Ukraine. It's clearly a seismic global moment with terrible consequences for the people of Ukraine today. When I asked the class, and I surveyed them to ask what they would like me to ask you, most of the questions focused on that crisis, what they could do, how they should respond. Was there anything positive that could be salvaged from this tragedy, like a rapid move towards green energy in Europe? Do you have any advice for them on long-term issues which this crisis highlights that they should be focused on as young leaders in Europe?
Well, of course, given the difficulties and the images that we're all watching every day on television, the bombing of cities, hundreds of thousands of civilians trapped in different parts of Ukraine without access to food or water or electricity, it's difficult in this moment, particularly when you think about the fact that this was just an unprovoked, unjustified, brazen act of aggression that was completely unnecessary. It's hard to see much positive. But, of course, in any crisis, there are important lessons to be drawn about ways in which societies can be more resilient, the world can make real progress, and we certainly see that with respect to Ukraine. And I would just identify three things that have emerged from this where I think young people can take both hope and real lessons. The first is, frankly, the power of civil society, of the grassroots, of people organizing, not through government or through, formal institutions, but simply pulling together to respond to a crisis, to generate international goodwill, to solve immediate problems. And we're seeing this in cities and towns across Ukraine, just a remarkable exercise of will, determination, creativity by young people, by old people, by men, women, children, who are finding ways to deal with the war and the attacks on their cities incredibly creatively. And this didn't just happen overnight. This happened because of years of civil society building in Ukraine, this vibrant country with a vibrant populace that has made clear repeatedly over the course of the past 2 decades that it's not prepared to just be told what to do, and that it's not going to have its destiny or its future determined for it, but it will determine it for itself. And we saw that in the Maidan protests a decade ago. We saw that in the Orange Revolution in 2004, 2005. And so when you think about the Washington Ireland program and you think about all the ways in which efforts are afoot in both Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland to try to build cross-community, grassroots, civil society efforts at stronger, more resilient, more just societies, when a moment of crisis comes, all of that work will end up paying off in the way that we are seeing it pay off in Ukraine. The second thing is that I think this has been a wake-up call to the world on exactly the point that Bryan just mentioned, which is the world seeking to reduce its dependence generally on fossil fuels and specifically on oil and gas from Russia. President Biden, of course, took the step of banning Russian oil imports to the United States, but he also noted that it would, we're in a privileged position to be able to do that because we are an energy producer and because the amount of energy that we actually import from Russia is relatively limited, and that European countries are not in the same place as the United States on this. So he and the President of the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, issued a public statement a few weeks ago that didn't get, I think, as much attention as it deserved. It was a long-term vision for how the U.S. and Europe could work together on an energy transition, not just to reduce overall dependence on Russian energy, but to increase the extent to which we have a resilient, renewables-based approach to energy that will ultimately turn the U.S. and Europe into clean energy superpowers. And when the president goes to Europe next week, he will engage with the European Union leaders on exactly this point around energy. And then the third point to make is the response to what's happened in Ukraine has not just been a response by governments. It's been a response by the private sector, companies from the United States, from Europe, from the rest of the world, making clear where they stand on this moral question, ending reducing or ending their operations in Russia, making clear that they're not going to participate in Putin's illegal war. You look at the outpouring of support from young people and community organizations the world over as they look to help alleviate the refugee crisis and humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. This has genuinely been a whole of society response. And in all of the tragedy and in all of the difficulty, that has been quite incredible to see. And some of the most potent elements of that response have been beyond the hands or reach of government officials such as myself. They've been in the hands of just ordinary citizens. And so, sorry to give a very long answer to that question, but those are three things that I would point to in the midst of all this that I think give us good lessons for how we can engage with and deal with difficulties and challenges the world over, whether they're incipient crises or long-term challenges that we're grappling with week in, week out.